Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Biology in the Basement. Up close and personal review, since I've only got my Chromebook to work from. My Mac is on the fritz and I'm going to have to take it to the doctor. So we'll move things a little bit closer. Um, Sorry about, the face and everything, but that's genetics for you. So, before we talk about genetics, we're going to talk about cells today. What we're just going to cover the basics, different types of cells and cell parts, and that's it. The next lecture tomorrow, we'll dive into cell processes, what cells actually do. We will look at the parts today, but all we will talk about is the basics of the cell. So let's get started with a fact of the day, and that is, turns out, if you didn't know this, humans can tell the difference between the pouring of hot water and the pouring of cold water because there is a different viscosity or thickness of the different temperatures of water that we can discriminate with our ear. So, there's your fact of the day. Who knew how good our hearing was? Not me. What's that? Anyways, the cell, right? Basic unit of life. We talked immediately about the two different types of cells so that we could differentiate right off the bat that there are great differences in types of cells on many levels. But there were two big differences. There's this whole world that we call prokaryotic cells, more commonly referred to as bacteria. They are these very small cells, no nuclei, no set organelles. They do have a ribosome, but that's more of a tool as we learn to help make proteins. They have DNA, but there's no membrane around it or any other parts. It is a very simple structure, does not grow very large. That's what we call bacteria or prokaryotic cells. The other kingdoms, right, plants, animals, fungus, and those big three, and the protists, they they are all eukaryotic cells where they have a nucleus that surrounds the DNA inside. They have other organelles and parts that have specific places for specific functions. So those were the first two differences. We then looked at the cell theory. What did scientists find? Luckily, we were able to see cells with the microscope. We could not see the atom with any type of microscope, but we now got into things that we could see. And since we invented the microscope and have advanced it since then, we came up with some universal discoveries that seem to apply to most, if not all, cells. As we learn, there are exceptions. And that is all living things are made up of at least one cell or many cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living things, and that means that cells can do all 8 characteristics of living things on their own. All cells maintain homeostasis and respond to stimuli and have DNA and do things like that. So that's what that term means. And then, of course, cells come from pre-existing cells, right? You can't have a cell come from thin air. It must be born from a pre-existing cell. But, of course, that begs the question, well, where did the first cell come from? If cells come from pre-existing cells, who was the initial domino pusher? Well, we talked about protobionts and all the other ways that the first cell probably formed. But yes, the first cell came from some kind of protobiont, which came from some kind of very simple nucleotide that may have a virus-like quality to it, but we don't really know. But anyways, that does bring up a question. So not all living things came from the first cell. Where'd that come from, right? If the cell is the basic unit of structure and function, then what are mitochondria and chloroplasts? Because they have DNA, they maintain homeostasis, they respond to stimuli, take in energy, and use materials and things like that. So they also follow the 8 characteristics of living things. So that's an even more basic unit. So that kind of goes against it. But we've agreed that the cell kind of still is the universal thing. But it does bring up another evolutionary question, which we talk about later. And of course, if all living things are made up of cells, then what the heck is a virus? Because obviously it has made its presence known. That's for a fact. So they can be just considered an infectious particle for now until we give them a name, but they have shown their face. And of course, we talked about plant versus animal cells. Plant cells have a chloroplast, a large central vacuole, and a cell wall, where the animal cell has the centriole. And what I'm talking about are organelles, parts of cells. Right? Cells have different parts that have different functions. These different parts all have their own specific job, right? I won't read these. You have access to them. You know them. But like I said, each one has its own specific function and does that to keep the cell happy, aka maintain homeostasis. So that's it for the basics of the cell. We'll be back next time with cell processes. And Draco out.